The doors to the America's Got Talent stage opened wider than he expected. And for a split second, he wished they wouldn't open at all. The lights spilled out first, blinding and hot, washing over him like a wave. Then came the sound, the low hum of the audience, thousands of people shifting, whispering, waiting. He took one hesitant step forward, then another, his shoes echoing too loudly against the glossy floor. His hands were clenched at his sides, fingers stiff, as if he were afraid they might start shaking if he let them go. This wasn't how he imagined it back home. Back there, it was small rooms, cracked mirrors, and quiet nights, singing softly so neighbors wouldn't complain. Rewinding the same old Elvis tracks again and again, memorizing every breath, every ache in the voice. But this stage was different. This stage didn't forgive mistakes, it exposed them. The applause rose, polite but thin, the kind given out of habit rather than excitement. He bowed his head slightly, offering a shy smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Cameras moved closer. He could feel them circling him like questions he didn't know how to answer. His chest felt tight, each breath shorter than the last. Simon Cowell watched him carefully from the judge's table, arms crossed, expression neutral but sharp. He'd seen this walk before, the nervous shuffle, the hopeful eyes, the quiet fear hiding behind a smile. So had the audience. They had watched hundreds like him step onto this same stage, dreams balanced on a single song. When he spoke his name, his voice came out softer than he wanted. The microphone caught everything, the slight tremble, the pause between words. He swallowed and tried again, a little louder this time, though his throat felt dry. The judges leaned in just enough to hear him. The crowd went still. "What will you be singing today?" came the question. He hesitated. In that pause lived every doubt he'd ever had. Every voice that told him not to choose this song. Every warning that said legends should be left alone. He glanced up briefly at the judges, then down again, as if grounding himself. "Elvis Presley," he said. A murmur rippled through the theater. Some people smiled, some raised their eyebrows. A few let out small skeptical laughs before catching themselves. Elvis wasn't just music, he was memory, expectation, comparison. Singing him meant inviting judgment before the first note even played. The band readied themselves. The opening chords floated into the air, familiar and heavy with history. For a moment he stood completely still, too still. His heart pounded so loudly he was sure the microphone could hear it. He told himself to breathe, but his lungs didn't seem to listen. Then he sang. The first line came out carefully, almost cautiously, like he was testing the ground beneath his feet. His voice was low, restrained, holding back more than it revealed. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. Simon shifted slightly in his chair. Somewhere in the audience, someone crossed their arms. He felt it. That dangerous space where dreams start to slip. But then something inside him loosened. It wasn't confidence. It was memory. Nights alone with the radio. Lyrics whispered into the dark, singing not to impress but to survive. He lifted his head just a little, letting the sound open up, letting the weight in his chest move into the note instead of fighting it. The difference was subtle, but powerful. The next line carried warmth. The line after that carried pain. Not copied, not exaggerated, but lived in. The audience leaned forward without realizing it. Conversations stopped. Phones lowered. Even the air in the room seemed to slow. He wasn't trying to sound like Elvis anymore. He was trying to feel what Elvis felt. And suddenly, the nerves didn't vanish. They transformed. They became energy, focus, truth. His shoulders relaxed. His stance widened. His voice, once fragile, now held steady, filling the room in a way no one expected. By the time he reached the end of the opening verse, the room was no longer waiting for him to fail. It was waiting to hear what he would do next. As the music flowed into the next section, something remarkable happened. Not loudly, not suddenly, but unmistakably. The distance between the singer and the song disappeared. His breathing slowed, syncing perfectly with the rhythm, and his voice settled into a place that felt honest rather than rehearsed. Each note landed with intention, not because he was trying to impress, but because he was finally letting himself feel every word. The audience sensed it immediately. The room, once filled with quiet skepticism, had shifted into a shared stillness. It was the kind of silence that only forms when people are afraid to break the moment. No coughing, no shuffling, no whispers, just thousands of eyes locked onto a single figure standing under the lights. His hands, once stiff at his sides, began to move naturally, a small gesture here, a slow lift of the palm there, not an imitation of Elvis's iconic movements, but echoes of emotion finding their way out. His face softened, eyes closing briefly as he held a note just long enough to let it ache. Simon Cowell leaned forward. It was subtle, but those who knew him recognized it instantly. His posture changed, elbows now resting on the desk, attention fully claimed. He wasn't evaluating anymore. He was listening. One of the judges glanced toward him, then back at the singer, as if to confirm they were witnessing the same shift. The chorus arrived, and with it, the turning point. The singer's voice opened up, fuller now, carrying depth that reached far beyond the melody. It wasn't loud in a showy way. It was controlled, grounded, and rich with feeling. The kind of sound that wraps around a room and pulls everyone inside it. Somewhere in the audience, a woman pressed her hand to her chest, another wiped at her eyes without even realizing tears had formed. Halfway through the chorus, something rare happened. Applause broke out. Not the polite kind, not the delayed kind. This was spontaneous, emotional, uncontrollable. People clapped because they didn't know what else to do with what they were feeling. The singer opened his eyes, startled by the reaction. For a split second his voice wavered, not from weakness but from being overwhelmed. He swallowed, steadied himself and kept going. That moment changed everything. The applause didn't interrupt him, it fueled him. His confidence didn't spike into arrogance, it deepened into assurance. His voice grew stronger, smoother, carrying a quiet authority that hadn't been there before. He was no longer asking for permission to be heard. He had earned it. The judges exchanged looks. One nodded slowly, lips pressed together, eyes shining. Another leaned back, exhaling, as if releasing tension they hadn't realized they were holding. Simon's expression had softened, the skepticism replaced with something closer to respect. As the bridge approached, the music stripped back, fewer instruments, more space. This was the most dangerous part of the song, the place where emotion had nowhere to hide. The singer stepped into it without flinching. His voice dropped to a near whisper. Every word felt personal, almost confessional. The microphone captured the texture in his voice, the slight rasp, the breath between phrases, the ache that couldn't be faked. You could hear his story in it. Long nights, quiet hopes, a love for music that had carried him further than he ever thought possible. The final note of the bridge hung in the air, trembling, unresolved. Then came the last chorus. He lifted his chin, eyes open now, meeting the crowd for the first time without fear. His voice soared, not shouting, not forcing, but expanding naturally, filling the theater with warmth and conviction. The audience rose to their feet one by one, as if pulled upward by the sound itself. When the final note rang out, he held it steady, letting it fade on its own terms. No dramatic flourish, no over-singing, just truth. The silence that followed was heavy, electric and absolute. For a heartbeat, no one moved. No one spoke. It was as if the entire theater needed a moment to understand what had just happened. Then the eruption came. Cheers thundered through the room. Standing ovation. Shouts, whistles, tears, disbelief. The singer brought a hand to his mouth. Eyes wide, chest heaving. He shook his head slowly, overwhelmed, as if afraid this might disappear if he blinked. On that stage, in that moment, it was clear. This was no longer just an audition. The noise in the theater refused to die down. Applause rolled in waves, crashing against the stage again and again, until the host gently stepped forward, raising a hand to calm the crowd. The singer stood frozen at center stage, chest rising and falling, eyes glassy with disbelief. He wiped at his face quickly, embarrassed by the tears, but they kept coming anyway. Simon Cowell didn't speak right away. He sat there quietly, looking at the young man as if trying to place him in his memory, as if searching for the right words that wouldn't cheapen what had just happened. That pause stretched longer than any critique ever could. The audience leaned forward, holding its breath all over again. Finally Simon leaned into the microphone. I'm going to be honest with you, he said, his voice calm but deliberate. I've heard Elvis songs my entire life. I've heard them sung well, I've heard them sung badly. And I've heard them sung by people trying very hard to be someone else. The singer nodded slowly, barely daring to look up. But what you just did, Simon continued, was something very different. The room went completely silent. You didn't walk out here like a star, Simon said. You walked out here like someone terrified, and I liked that, because it told me this mattered to you. And when you started singing, I didn't hear an impersonation. I heard honesty. The singer's lips trembled. He pressed them together, trying to hold himself together as Simon spoke. Another judge leaned in. Your voice isn't just trained, she said softly. It's lived in. You can't teach that. You didn't sing at us. You sang from somewhere deep and we felt it. A third judge nodded. You reminded me why people fall in love with music in the first place. The crowd applauded again, but this time more gently, more reverently. Simon lifted a hand, asking for quiet once more. He stood up slowly, never breaking eye contact with the singer. That movement alone sent a ripple of anticipation through the theater. The singer's hands came together instinctively, fingers interlaced, knuckles white. You know, Simon said, pacing just a step away from the desk, people think Elvis is about the voice, or the look, or the moves. But the truth is, Elvis was about feeling, and that's the hardest thing to get right. Simon stopped walking. You got it right. The singer's breath hitched audibly. Tears spilled freely now, and he made no attempt to hide them. He shook his head, whispering a quiet thank you that barely carried past the stage monitors. Simon turned toward the judges' table, then back to the crowd. This show is about moments, he said. And that was one of them. The audience erupted again, sensing what was coming before it happened. The singer looked confused, eyes darting between the judges and the cheering crowd. His heart hammered so loudly it felt like it might break through his chest. Simon placed his hand over the golden buzzer. Time slowed. The singer's knees buckled slightly as realization hit him all at once. He raised a hand, shaking his head, mouth open in disbelief, silently pleading and thanking at the same time. Simon smiled, just a little, and pressed the button. Gold exploded from above, raining down like sunlight made real. The crowd screamed, the music swelled. Confetti filled the air, spinning and sparkling as it fell around the singer. He dropped to his knees, overwhelmed, one hand pressed to the stage as if to prove this was real. He sobbed openly now, shoulders shaking, laughter and tears colliding in his chest. Judges rushed the stage, surrounding him, lifting him to his feet. One hugged him tightly, another wiped tears from their own eyes. From somewhere in the crowd voices chanted his name. He looked up into the storm of gold, eyes shining, face transformed by disbelief and joy. In that moment, he wasn't just a contestant anymore. He was proof that nerves don't mean weakness, proof that fear doesn't cancel talent, proof that honesty can still stop a room cold. As the music faded and the confetti settled, Simon stepped forward one last time. Remember this feeling, he said, because this is just the beginning. The singer nodded, unable to speak, heart full beyond words. He had walked onto that stage shaking. He walked off changed forever.